Welcome, everybody. It's good to have you here on a quiet, warm Saturday morning. My name is Nathan Blake. I'm supposed to help facilitate a conversation here this morning. You know a couple people up here, but I'll maybe just read off names going around the table here real quick, and then I think you'll get a better sense of the various stories related to immigration, especially. Just a real diversity of experience represented up here that I think will be really, really great. Cecilia Martinez is over here, MJ Ghazali, Alex Piedras, Monica Reyes, Sonia Reyes Snyder, Prakash, and I mess up your name almost every time I try, so.
I have enough vowels in there. One more up.
Okay. And Marlu Abartka. So appreciate you all coming. And this is Beto O'Rourke, who is running for president, you might have heard. And we're happy that he's joined by his wife, Amy, as well this trip. So, welcome.
Thank you each for making some time to join us, and more importantly, to share your stories and to contribute to this country being able to fully fulfill its potential and live up to its promise. I think that's what has brought us all together here today. And as Nathan said, and thank you, Nathan, for helping to organize this, I'm lucky to be joined by my wife, Amy, and this is my 5th time in Iowa since I announced our run for president, but this is Amy's 1st time. So I thought before I talked a little bit about our plan, and then most importantly, turn the microphones over to you to listen to your ideas. I'd ask Amy to talk a little bit about this subject from our perspective on the U.S.-Mexico border in El Paso, where we're raising our 3 kiddos. So Amy, I'll turn it over to you.
It's great to be here with all of you today, and really happy to be in Iowa. Beto's been, this is his 5th visit, as he said, and every time he comes home, he just shares the most amazing stories, so it's great to be here in person and get to meet some of the people that he's been meeting along the way. I have been living in El Paso since 2004, didn't grow up in El Paso. I was born in Chicago and then raised mostly in northern New Mexico, so southwest, but living in El Paso was my first time living in a border community, and I didn't really know what to expect when I moved there, didn't expect to like it, and it has just been the most amazing place to raise our kids. When I first moved there, I spent 7 years working in a neighborhood called the Segundo Barrio, actually with Cynthia Cano, who's on Beto's team. And we worked in a school that served predominantly first-generation Mexican-American students that had come to live in El Paso to seek a better life for their families. Most spoke predominantly Spanish, were entering school with no English, and trying to work their way through a really challenging system. We now have 3 kids who are in the public schools in El Paso. They're in a dual language program. So they're learning English one day, Spanish the next day, all subject areas, reading the great classics in English and in Spanish, going to school with kids, some of whom's families live in the adjoining city of Ciudad Juarez, and so truly experiencing this really magical binational community where families live and work and play on both sides of the U.S.-Mexico border. And so feel very privileged to have experienced this unique community and get a chance to travel with Beto across the country to share that story of a beautiful culture, people, not a scary, dangerous place that is so often conveyed in the national news. So happy to be here with you today and looking forward to this discussion.
Thanks, Amy. And I'll pick up where Amy left off, and that's the inspiration of our hometown. El Paso, with Ciudad Juarez, forms the largest binational community in the Western Hemisphere. So there are 3 million of us from 2 countries speaking 2 languages who are joined, not separated by the Rio Grande River. And we form something far greater than the sum of our parts or the number of people, something that may defy measurement or description, but those things that we can point your attention to. El Paso is one of the safest cities in the United States of America, not despite, we would argue, but because we are a city of immigrants. A quarter of those with whom we live in El Paso were born somewhere else, chose us, left their hometown, their home country, their home language, their families to be here, to do better for themselves and their kids, but to do better for all of us. And it brings a point home to me that if immigration is a problem, it is the best possible problem this country could have. We know that there are millions in the United States of America who do not have status today, who do not have documentation, but are working the toughest jobs that are available in America today. The meatpacking plants here in Iowa, the farm working jobs throughout Texas, throughout the service industry in the United States of America. More than 1 million dreamers who are every bit as American as anyone else here in this room, who are not just being taught in our schools, but are so often teaching in our schools, are not just being defended by those who serve and put their lives on the line in deployments around the world, but are the same people who are deployed and serving and putting their lives on the line around the world. And so this strength, this asset, that we are a destination for the people of the planet, must be capitalized on with immigration laws that reflect our values and our interests and the reality in our communities here in Des Moines, back home in El Paso, Texas, throughout the United States of America. Our immigration proposal seeks to do that. We begin by saying that we will never again put another child in another cage when they've traveled 2,000 miles fleeing the deadliest places on the planet. We will not deport her mother back to the very country from which she fled. We will not separate those families anymore. And those families that have been separated, we will reunite them at once. We will spare no expense. We will pay any price. We will make sure that we stop visiting this torture and cruelty on our fellow human beings. We'll make sure that we honor our asylum laws and don't ask people to remain in place in Mexico, but allow them to follow our laws and make sure that they have their credible fear hearing, and not keep them in detention in for-profit prisons and cinder block cells, but release them through a family case management program that ensures that they follow our laws, that they show up to their court hearings, that they meet with their ICE officers, so that we are both safe and we're creating greater value for the taxpayer. It's 1/10 of the cost, and we're being far more humane to those who are at their most desperate and vulnerable. Second, we free dreamers from any fear of deportation by ensuring that we get them on the path to citizenship as quickly and as surely as possible. Their brothers, their sisters, their mothers and their fathers, the original dreamers, which is how I've heard every dreamer talk about their parents. We make sure that the dreamer's freedom is not purchased at the expense of their parents. They too will have permanent residency here in the United States and be on a path to citizenship. And then millions more that are described working these incredibly tough jobs, all too often not working for a minimum wage, working for something well below a minimum wage. Their immigration status used as leverage against them to keep them in a modern day bondage. I want to make sure that they can contribute to their full potential to this country's success. So allow them to register with the government, pay any outstanding fines or back taxes, and then make sure that they're able to fully participate in civic and economic and ultimately democratic life in this country. In our plan, we create a new visa category. So if a community here, a nonprofit, a church, a mosque, or a synagogue wants to sponsor a refugee at no expense to the federal government, make sure that they have a home, connections, a job here in this community so that they can reveal their genius here in the United States of America, they're able to do that. We adjust the other visa categories to make sure that people who are standing in a line, waiting to reunite with family or to work a job in this country are not waiting in a line that stretches 15 or 20 or 25 years long right now, because that's the case in the United States today. And then we make sure that we see security not as walls or cages or internal ICE enforcements in Des Moines or in El Paso, but by treating people with respect and with dignity, by making sure that we value those immigrants who have chosen this country and are contributing to our success every day. When we do that, we will be a far stronger, more successful country and economy, and we will be a much safer country as well, and we offer El Paso as the example of that. This is not something that has to be a proposal of the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. We want this to be an American proposal based on a tradition of a country of immigrants and asylum seekers and refugees from the world over, the very foundation of our strength. That's the proposal that we have made. We're looking forward to hearing your input, your ideas, your stories, your suggestions on how to make this even better, and hopefully to help illustrate why this is so urgent and important that we take this on now. So with that, I'll turn this back over to Nathan, and we'll look forward to having your comments and your suggestions, and looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
So one of the things I think that has a lot of consensus around the country from all kind of walks of kind of political life, except for maybe in Congress, but this idea that folks who were brought over as young children are, as you just put it, as American as any of us and deserve to stay. And that's why President Obama went through, passed or implemented DACA. We have a couple DACA recipients here. I just wondered if you all wanted to talk maybe about your experience and maybe interrogate how your work plan would affect, your lives or families' lives going forward, if you have questions about that. But I think it would be worthwhile to hear maybe a little bit about your background. I don't know if Cecilia, if you feel comfortable starting off.
Yeah, absolutely. So I received DACA. It was implemented, the policy in 2012, but I didn't receive it until 2015. So just, giving some context back into, the community at the time wasn't really sure what this policy was doing. There wasn't very much trust at the time between the community and the government, because we were being told you have to provide all your information, you have to give all this over. But it was a safety net. Parents encouraged their kids to apply. I applied. I got it in time to attend college, and then I could get a job. And so it's helped me in those ways as well. And so as it keeps going, I'm sure you've heard a lot of the insuredness, the fear of it not being reinstated, and the uncertainty. And so, of course, the pathway to citizenship for DACA recipients, TPS, DED individuals would be greatly beneficial. But then also, I think reevaluating who qualifies under DACA, who would be able to then go through that process, because there's just arbitrary age restrictions and dates that were implemented originally in DACA, and so a lot of people were left out and were unable to apply originally, and so that created a lot of barriers. And so I think if those things are addressed as well, that would definitely make that a better plan.
Yeah, Cecilia, I think that makes so much sense, and I think that the definition for those who qualify for DACA should be expanded as liberally as possible to get to the spirit and intent of the program, which is, as Nathan said, if you came to this country at a young age, under the age of 18, with your parents, perhaps in some cases without your parents, perhaps the only option for you, especially if you came from El Salvador or Honduras or Guatemala or other countries on the face of the planet where it was not safe for you to stay at home and your government or your parents can guarantee your life. I want to make sure that you're not punished for making that decision, and that in fact we benefit from everything that you'll be able to do over the course of your life. And when I think about the barriers put in your place, the inability to qualify for many student loan programs or scholarships or grants, and the persistence that dreamers have shown in the face of those obstacles to still better themselves and contribute far more to our communities and country success than they will ever take, it is a no-brainer to me that it would be the stupidest possible decision in this country's history to deport more than 1 million of our fellow Americans back to a country where they may not speak the language, may no longer have family, and if they're successful against those long odds, will be successful for that place, not this one. In 2016, after Donald Trump was elected, we held a town hall for dreamers in El Paso, Texas, and you mentioned that uncertainty and anxiety that dreamers face today, and that they did right after the election of a man who promised to deport every single dreamer. And they shared something that you just alluded to. They said, President Obama and the United States government asked me to come out of the shadows, register with the government, tell the United States government exactly where I lived, what my phone number is, and how you can find me. And now that information is in the hands of somebody who wants to deport me. And so we were talking to students from the University of Texas at El Paso who said, I'm trying to prepare for my fall semester finals, but I'm also packing my bags. Should I be deported back to Pakistan or Mexico or Nigeria or whatever country their parents originally brought them from? I cannot imagine the stress of having to live a life here in this country and be prepared to have to leave this country at the same time. So let's not only ensure that DACA is applied in the most liberal manner possible, let's go well beyond DACA to comprehensive immigration reform to ensure that we're not even talking about the qualifications within that program, but we're bringing millions into an ability to fully contribute to their full potential, including DACA and DAPA recipients. Thanks, Cecilia.
Monica, did you have anything to add on that subject?
So, as a DACA recipient, I, like Cecilia, had to go through the whole application process, and for me it was, like you said, identifying myself to the government and telling them everything, giving them everything but a blood sample. And it was a big step forward for me, and I honestly thought that maybe this was a first step forward to something more permanent. And unfortunately, we haven't seen it, but at the time I thought, oh man, this is for me. This is my opportunity to finally get a driver's license, to have access to more opportunities. But in reality, it was for my family. DACA helped not just me, but it helped my whole family. It helped us have safer transportation by having 2 people in the family now with driver's licenses. It helped us buy a house for the first time in our lives. It helped us have the opportunities just started coming around, and for the first time we were able to grab a hold of them. So I think that just having a more permanent status for all undocumented immigrants would be so good for our economy and create access to things that a lot of times we don't have access to as undocumented immigrants. So for me, that's one of the most beneficial parts of having some sort of status and having a pathway to citizenship, because I'll give you some examples. Growing up, we were in a really, how would you say that? My stepfather was very abusive in our family, and we were with him for 13 years. And throughout those 13 years, we went through a lot of abuse, not just my mom, but the whole family. And sometimes when you're undocumented, you're too scared to go to resources, or you don't think those resources are out there for you, or that you just don't have access to them, right? That you're cut off because you're there, but you're really not there. And then even just like health insurance, we never had health insurance when we were growing up. If I got sick, I had to use Vaporu to get better. Now I see my mom, she has so many health problems, and a lot of it could have been taken care of. She had just basic access to healthcare. And for higher education, I had to pay everything out of pocket. I didn't have any scholarships. Back when I graduated, there weren't really scholarships for college for undocumented students. Now there are more, but when I graduated, there really wasn't, and I didn't have access to it in the small town I grew up in. What I'm getting to is that having so many people in the shadows without a status leads to so many other problems that we could just avoid. And that's something that I would appreciate if you mentioned throughout your visits all across America is really bring to light that having this group of undocumented immigrants in our nation is really causing more issues. If we could just give our community some sort of legal status, we would start creating access to preventative measures and avoid a lot of issues that we see in our community.
Monica, I love the way that you just described your story and how you began by saying, you know, when I became eligible for DACA, I thought this was for me. And then I realized this is really good for everybody else. You mentioned public safety, being able to qualify for a driver's license, because undocumented immigrants are going to drive to the jobs that they're performing that no one born in this country or in this community is willing to work, that add to our economy and our quality of life. And I'd much rather that they're able to qualify for a driver's license, so we know who's on our roads and that they know the rules of the road, and we're all safer as a result. You mentioned your abusive father-in-law. I think about your safety, your mother's safety, the community's safety. When someone fears working with local law enforcement because they don't know if that local law enforcement officer is going to be forced to enforce federal immigration law, then they're not going to report crimes or testify in a trial or serve as a witness. We will be a more unjust society, a less safer community, without everybody being able to trust and work with law enforcement. The economic impact, and this shouldn't be the driver, but it's not insignificant. Over the next 20 years, the conservative estimate is that by legalizing those who are already contributing so much in this country, we add about $1.2 trillion to government receipts. That means more resources to invest in communities and people. If you're able now to qualify for student loans and grants and scholarships, you improve your learning potential, your earning potential, and the amount that you're going to be able to give back. So I love how you started with your personal story and expanded it to our story as a country. We stand to benefit when you have status and documentation, and should you choose, are able to pursue citizenship. One story, we were in Ottumwa yesterday, and a young dreamer came up to us. I think she's in high school, and she said, I want documentation because I want to serve in the National Guard. I want to be in the United States military. I want to serve this country so bad, and I just want it to be legal for me to be able to do that. Another case that this is not about her, this is about all of us and her willingness to serve and sacrifice for this country. So thank you for using your story to focus our attention on this. And to your request, yes, I want to do a much better job of talking about how this is in everyone's interest to do the right thing any way you measure it. So thank you, Monica.
When we talk about immigration, I think we have a tendency, especially with a certain emphasis from fear mongers, to focus just on the border and this, humanitarian crisis or whatever it is. But really, the story of immigration is much broader than that. And people come to our country in all sorts of different ways, have successes in all sorts of different facets of life. And I know, MJ, I know your story, your family's story is really inspiring. And you kind of run into some challenges recently with the Trump administration and how they're kind of make it more difficult for people to come, even family members. I wondered if you had a chance to talk about that.
Yeah. We all know that the United States is based on immigrants. This is the history of it. Immigration is not only about Hispanic people, it's more broad, like you said, Nathan. We're Lebanese, so Lebanon is an old country, come from the Phoenicians, like more than 5,000 years of history. My family migrated here in the 50s, and we own restaurants in town. We know that there's bad immigrants, and there's a lot of good immigrants. Bad, yes, citizens, there's a lot of good, yes, citizens too. It's not like, saying things, I have a degree in business administration. I'm a U.S. citizen right now. My sister used to help at a restaurant that we owned here in the 80s, and she was undocumented back then. And the law enforcement came, and they had to arrest her. She had to see the judge. Then she got a temporary work permit. She had a driver license and Social Security. My sister now, she can't come here, and I'm paying a lot of money for a lawyer in order for her to come back. She didn't do anything bad, all she had is she worked illegally in our restaurant while waiting for her papers. So this is the problem we're having right now. Bring my sister here. I'm sure there's a lot of worse than that with a lot of people dealing with things, but this is what's happening with us.
Thanks for sharing that story, and I think it should draw our attention to two competing proposals. The president has proposed that we end family reunification, your ability to be able to see your sister and have her be able to live in this community and contribute to our success as a priority. He wants to diminish family reunification as a priority, and in exchange for quote-unquote merit-based, that we're going to select people based on some arbitrary definition of what merit means. Our proposal wants to expand family-based migration. Ensure that your sister can be here. She should not have what is effectively a lifetime bar on reentry for a technical violation of immigration law. If she's anything like any other undocumented immigrant, she paid far more into this country in the form of taxes, in the form of job creation and economic growth, than she will ever be able to draw down over the course of her life. So the American taxpayer is the one who gains if we're able to get her here. And then obviously we can't put a price on your ability to join your sister, for her to be with her family. That's just, to me, it almost seems like a basic, fundamental human right. And that used to be what this country was about, the inspiration to the rest of the world. So let's make sure that, again, we don't ask your sister to endure a lifetime bar on reentry or to be in a line to join a family that might stretch 15 or 20 years long. See her success here as our success as a country. And I appreciate your reminder, and yours, Nathan, that yes, very often we talk about immigration in terms of the Western Hemisphere. Immigration in this country, and we are so fortunate, is the planet. And that's a wonderful thing. We are unique in the nations of the world that we've decided not to define ourselves by race or ethnicity or common ancestry, just by this idea that we're all created equal. So we wish you and your sister all the luck in the world. If there's some way that we can be helpful in this case, I certainly would love to do that. But thank you for sharing your story. Appreciate it. Yeah.
One of the creative things in your proposal that was innovative and kind of a cool thing to think about, I think, is this idea of community-based sponsorship. And I know basically everyone around the table, I think, has a lot of experience with working with nonprofit groups or various kind of immigrant support systems, networks. But I know, I wanted to get the reaction from a few of you that haven't spoken yet. Sonia, Marlu, maybe Alex, if you could just talk about what potential you see there, or if you could just maybe talk about your experience. Maybe Sonia, and share my mic with you.
So I came to the United States as a 16-year-old undocumented minor unaccompanied from El Salvador. I arrived to California, and that was back in 1992. I just was able, after thousands of dollars and a lot of fear, I was able to get my green card just this past December. So it took about 27 years to get it, and it is very frustrating when you hear the narrative of, just do it the right way, just go get your citizenship and all these different steps. So because of my background, I have been working in grassroots efforts for almost 20 years now, and I've had the privilege of working with a lot of DACA students, with a lot of TPS recipients, many of those who have already left the country or the state. Haitians lost their TPS status. So I have been able to see how it has impacted a lot of families, but also how it has impacted positively the state and the local communities, because we have a lot of DACA recipients, TPS recipients that, or in undocumented residents of Iowa that are contributing to their communities, not just by working. And of course, every time you work, you pay taxes. So that is automatic. When you go to the grocery store, you pay taxes. So everyone is contributing. But on top of that, they are giving their time, they're volunteering, they are making the state a better state just by being here. And with that being said, one of the things that I continue to see right now is children of TPS recipients.
I had TPS until December. And I have 2 children, one a sophomore in college and one that is going to college this coming year. And we had a fear of, well, am I going to be deported because I didn't have my green card yet. Thankfully, I married a U.S. citizen, and it took us many years, but I was able to get my green card. But we have many of those college students now that their parents are TPS recipients, and they are in fear. I had an intern that she was thinking about dropping out and going back to El Salvador with her family. Her family has businesses here, and they're very well established, but they're taking that money from the state with them to El Salvador. So it's a very concerning situation. We don't have enough mental health services in the state to really provide support for these Iowans that are here, that are contributing, but also talking about the bigger impact. A lot of these students are going to school with U.S. citizens' children, who with white children, or that have created relationships with these kids that might be leaving. So that impacts. It's a bigger picture. Yeah. So I've like I said, I've had the privilege of seeing the good and the bad of the consequences and how families don't give up. I thankfully never gave up. I continue to work with the community and advocate for the community, but it gets very tiring for a lot of the advocates because you will see a lot of the same people over and over. So if I can ask for something for when you are out in the campaign, talking about the contributions of our community is one of the most important things. We need to change the narrative of people. People say, yeah, they're paying taxes. Yes, we are all paying taxes. Regardless of what you do, you are paying taxes. If we don't change the narrative of what immigrants do and contribute to the community, things are not going to change.
You're right. And the answer is yes to your request that we talk about this honestly and truthfully and factually. TPS holders, more than 300,000, I believe, paid more than $4 billion in local, state, and federal taxes. So any fear that TPS holders are an economic drain on the country, actually the opposite is true. The president calling immigrants rapists and criminals, in fact, they commit crimes at a far lower rate than those who are born in this country. This economic revitalization that we've seen in smaller communities. We had a town hall in Goldthwaite, Texas, really small town, and we had it in a restaurant, I believe, started by 2 immigrants who just arrived from Michoacan in Mexico, used their meager savings to invest in a small town, literally to ensure its continued success and vitality and economic growth. And it's not just in border states like Texas. We were in Storm Lake, Iowa, and we were getting some pan dulce before the town hall that we held at a bakery owned by a recent immigrant, Carlos, who had come following the meatpacking jobs there. But as he saved, he invested in the success of Storm Lake. So TPS holders, dreamers, undocumented immigrants are contributing far more in every way that we can measure, and more importantly, the ways that we can't, the families that they're raising, the quality of life that they are producing in those communities. All that's important. One additional facet of this plan that I want to make sure you know about, Sonia, is for green card holders like you, legal permanent residents in this country who number more than 9 million, who in those cases have been here for 5 years or more as a legal permanent residents, now qualify for citizenship. We're going to waive any citizenship fees, and we're going to mail you a pre-filled citizenship application form, because when you applied for your green card, you gave us every single fact about your life. Maybe not a blood sample, as Monica said, but just about that. So we know everything we need to know about you. We now need to help you take that next step when you've spent 5 years here as a green card holder, so that you can become a U.S. citizen. Imagine 9 million new U.S. citizens able to fully contribute, and not just economically, That's important, but civically and democratically, run for office, hold office, vote in federal elections, everything that makes this democracy in this country so exceptional. So yes, I will do that, and I'll make sure that, Nathan mentioned this community-based visa for those who are still in El Salvador, who are trying to leave one of the deadliest countries on the face of the planet. If there's a community organization here in Des Moines that wants to sponsor them so that they don't have to make that 2,000-mile journey unaccompanied on foot or on La Bestia or the Beast, there can be a lawful, orderly process to do that at no expense to the federal government that allows this local community to step up and do what it wants to do in the first place. So thanks for using your story to...
I have a follow-up.
Yes, yes ma'am.
Regarding the citizenship, it is one of the biggest challenges for people to become citizens is the test. Just the fact that I had to be held to a higher standard to know things that most people probably don't know.
Right.
I think that is unfair, and it is just another barrier that is put on there. The city, honestly, people ask me all the time, so you're gonna become a citizen, right? And I always say, I don't wanna take that test. And I don't think, the elimination of that would make it's only fair.
Right.
That we don't have to do that. Like you said, yeah, the U.S. government already has all of our information. When you become a green card holder, they already have it. Why that test? So if I can advocate for something today is the elimination of that test, because it is not fair. It is just another barrier.
I think it's something for us to think about. It was interesting. I met a young woman in El Paso whose mother was a green card holder and was applying to be a U.S. citizen. And as you know, part of the process for those who do not yet know English is to learn the English language. This is back in the 1980s, and so she was talking about how families banded together to buy her a VCR and the VHS tapes so that she could learn English language. The entire community came together to help her do that, to be able to pass that citizenship test. I was a member of Congress for 6 years in El Paso, and far more often it was green card holders who knew who I was, because that was a requirement of the citizenship test, than those U.S. citizens that I represented in Congress, which really impressed me and actually just showed the desire to be civically engaged and their understanding of the good fortune to be in the greatest democracy on the face of the planet. And in some ways, those new citizens or green card holders perhaps even better appreciate our good fortune to have this democracy than those who were born in it and took it for granted. So would love to have your feedback and guidance on how we improve the citizenship application process and that test. But I also want to recognize that it is to our net benefit to add to our democracy in this way. So anyhow, thank you, Sonia.
So you mentioned the great contributions and kind of civic engagement that immigrants often bring to our communities. And one of the people that's done that for a long time here in this city is Alex. I didn't know if you had anything to add on these last couple points.
I am glad that Sonia brought out the citizenship test as something that can be improved. I will share the story of my mother. My mother has been a legal resident for a long time, and she hasn't been able to travel to Mexico since the election because she has fears of going back and not being able to get back in. Now, she hasn't broken any laws, she has a green card, I'm a U.S. citizen, but the reason she hasn't become a U.S. citizen is because she's afraid of that test. And she's 65. So, not to take anything away from our elders, but it's a little bit more difficult for elderly people to master all these questions that all of us that have gone through the test have done. So yeah, I really welcome that suggestion of improving or maybe eliminating the test or making it where maybe or elder members of the community or those maybe with learning disability or mental health disability are not stopped from becoming part of our society because of that. So thank you for suggesting that. I back that. I do want to go back to the contributions of our community members. I've been blessed to be here at Granby for 14 years, and most of my work is done with refugees and immigrants, students, first-generation students here. And I will tell you that going back to not only the economic contribution that they can give to our country, I want to go back to the contribution that they're gonna do for our kids, and I do mean that our kids. You know, you talk about your kids being in a dual language program. We have students here at Grandview that are DACA that are actually envisioning that for Iowa, and they're right here, right now at Grandview, and their vision is amazing because it's something that again we've been talking about in the state for years, and we haven't executed, at least not in Des Moines. Other parts of the state they have, but I think of these DACA students, and I see their expression, the desire to serve our society. So they definitely deserve a shot to become citizens. We have others that are trying to become nurses. We have a nursing shortage in the state and in the country.
Right.
And these are people that again later on will be taking care of all citizens. As we face these health issues down the road. Others want to become attorneys and serve in that way in our society and business owners. I mean, I just look into the crowd and I see some of those students that are here that I personally invite to come here because to me, they are the future of our country. And as we sit here and we talk about America, we talk about, how to improve it, I really think that these DACA, immigrants, refugees, asylees, I mean, they're the strength. They're the strength and they could be the base for us. So in my work here, in the community for over 20 years, I gotta say that this is inspiration. Sometimes people say, well, why do you stick around? Why don't you look for a more better paying job? And the reason is these young people that are here that, in a way, will strengthen our country. And unfortunately, they're getting the message right now from this administration that they're not welcome. And that's the saddest thing that I guess I face nowadays that I'm an American citizen, that I came here to this country because we were the night of freedom and opportunity, and now all I hear is, we just want you to go home. Even Iowa has become kind of a place where we have gone from the fields of opportunity to the fields of fear. I just want to add that hopefully, more people hear about the wonderful contributions that all these immigrants, recent immigrants, in asylees, yes, they're gonna make our country better.
Absolutely, and as you say all that, and it seems like we're in concert in understanding the positive contributions that immigrants, both documented and undocumented, dreamers and TPS holders make to this country in every way that we can measure, and in those ways that we're trying to describe that defy measurement. There's also another moral dimension to this that concerns me, which is the creation of a permanent underclass in this country, because though you're right, the Trump administration has openly attacked immigrants. The language that they've used, the cages in which they place children, the conditions in which they hold detainees, the internal ICE enforcement operations, the raids that are tearing apart families and entire communities. But we also know that much of this persisted before the Trump administration. And in some ways as a country, I fear that we had become comfortable with those who were willing to do this work and offer this value and make our communities safer and better without ever having the ability to fully participate in our success and contribute even more to our greatness. And so I think it's just really important that we meet this opportunity, this next election, with the urgency on this issue that it demands, or I fear that we will have some other version of this going forward, that maybe we'll have DACA upheld, but we'll have a limbo in which dreamers exist going forward. We have to break through that, and they must become U.S. citizens as soon as possible, or we will have lost this moment. And so I really appreciate what you just said and the way that you just said it. Thank you very much.
Marlou, we haven't gotten you into the conversation. I apologize. Just wondered if you had any response. I know you're a thoughtful, engaged participant and work with a lot of organizations in the community. Just wanted to get your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I want to reiterate a lot of what's already been said, particularly with the path to citizenship that Sonia and others have alluded to. My mom was undocumented for a huge part of my childhood, and after she married my dad, was eligible to become a permanent resident. And the thing that was holding her back was the fact that we were living in poverty and she could not afford to pay for the application. I'm a first generation college graduate, and being able to graduate from one of the best universities in this country, here locally, I've been able to escape poverty, and I'm the only person in my family who's been able to do so. But I paid almost $700 for my mom to apply for citizenship, and 2 years ago this August will be her anniversary of becoming a U.S. citizen. So when we hear people who perpetuate the narrative of, you know, well, if they did it the right way, those people aren't actually advocating for there to be less barriers to become citizens. And a lot of their words and actions make me believe that they actually aren't interested in making these people who contribute to the community actually become full participants of the community as citizens. Part of this work and my passion for immigration reform, it doesn't make any of us one issue voters or activists. It actually means that we're talking about making school more affordable for everyone, including DACA recipients. Two of my really good friends that are here graduated from Iowa high schools, but also were not allowed to receive in-state tuition at their universities, where as a U.S. citizen, could have arrived on the last day of school and graduated in Iowa high school and still qualified for in-state tuition. Same thing for making transportation more accessible and increasing the safety of our roads. Having everyone who lives in the United States be eligible for driver's licenses. Having healthcare for all, because everyone is independent of whether you're a citizen or not should be able to have access to healthcare. And also acknowledging that there is a private prison industrial complex, and that the United States benefits from keeping people from becoming citizens, from keeping people detained and in very inhumane ways in private prisons. Even DACA is an income flow for the United States because you have to renew every couple of years and pay over $400 to do so. So when we're talking about migration reform, it's also addressing other barriers that keep everyone from fully participating in all the opportunities that are afforded to you as a U.S. citizen.
Well, that was great. And your comments provoked this thought that for far too long, Democrats especially have been on the defensive on this issue. Candidates have tried to establish their security bona fides by saying, we're going to be really tough on these immigrants. We're going to build a wall. We're going to have internal enforcement. And then we will do the right and just thing. I think we have this opportunity, and everyone has said this more eloquently than I can, but doing the right and just thing is the first thing that we do. And everything good that we want, including security and safety, will follow. You probably know this, but Senators Clinton and Obama both voted for the Secure Fence Act in 2006, along with a lot of other good, well-intentioned Democrats. The fence that we have right now, 600 miles of it along the US-Mexico border, has contributed to the deaths of thousands of migrants, asylum seekers, and refugees who are fleeing crushing poverty or violence or persecution, trying to rejoin families or work jobs here in this country. In 1 year of the Obama administration, 400,000 of our fellow Americans, undocumented, were taken from their families and their communities and deported back to their countries of origin. So I say, following your lead and inspiration, let us get off the back foot. Let's waive those fees that have been a barrier to your mother. So no citizenship application fee whatsoever. Get dreamers out of this purgatory and into citizenship as soon as possible. Lift more than 11 million out of the shadows so that they can register with their government, but also contribute far more to our success. And then every good thing that you want will follow from doing the right thing up front and first. Let's not be afraid of doing the right thing anymore in this country. So that's what I hear loud and strong from you, whether that is healthcare, whether that is educational attainment, the opportunity to pursue higher education. Let's do it. It's the right thing to do to make this country so much stronger for it. So thank you. Thanks for saying that.
One of the things that I think you've done a good job of setting the tone on right from the outset was talking about the process for legal immigration, how difficult it's become, how expensive it gets, and some of the wait times. And I know, Prakash, this is one of your concerns with legal immigration and how long some of the wait times can be. I just wondered if you had some thoughts on that.
Sure, thank you, Nathan. First, I want to congratulate Congressman Beto for putting this package together. Without any doubt, I can say you're the first Democratic leader I met who has dug through immigration so deep on the legal side. I read through every page. Alex emailed me a couple of days ago, and then I read through last night and I read through this morning. The amount of information you have touched, you're the first Democratic leader I met. So congratulations and thank you for doing that. Number two, when I'm listening to all my friends, most of them I see in the community almost every day. If you are in Iowa, you see them more often than your family. The roots of this immigration in mid-60s, it is opened up to the rest of the world, not just from Europe, the legal immigration, that you can become a citizen, you don't have to be from Europe. So from then on, how did we conduct the whole immigration as a policy? Is quite different. Yes, we did have issues in Europe before 60s. We had Germans that participated in Nazi camps, and but still, our immigration took a positive way if they want to immigrate. We didn't call Germans killers. We let them immigrate, and then they participated in American dream. After 60s, the conversation has changed. From professionally in 70s, there's a requirement of doctors in rural areas, so a lot of Asian doctors have immigrated. And in 90s, we needed this Y2K problem to solve it. So we had a lot of immigrants came from India, China, and anywhere you can find a software engineer, we brought them here to solve the problem. So immigration has always been part of a foreign policy, and it was dealt really well. Example, President Bill Clinton has raised the number of H-1B visas from 65,000 to 195,000 because there's a requirement in a positive way. And guess what? I'm one of them. I came in 96. I didn't come from software, but I came from doing my master's in mechanical engineering, worked for research in Boeing, and then pursued my PhD for NASA a little bit, and then money is better than education at that point, I thought, and I joined Maytag in manufacturing. But a lot of my friends and colleagues have helped the country get this software boom. And all of a sudden, by end of 90s, when President George Bush had an opportunity to actually keep 195,000 going or bring it back to 65,000, it brought back to 65,000. It continued during Obama administration. There is even today, there's a lot of pressure to increase it. The negative situation of that is this. Today, for a H-1B person to become a citizen, it's 80, 90 years. It's economic. It's not even possible for a master's graduate. So what's happening is this. All these graduates, educated and very intelligent people are going back to their countries. And now the globalization, thanks to globalization, they have opportunities in their countries. All of a sudden, you must have seen, I'm sure you're on top of it, about the 5G issue. That China has developed this technology with these graduates going back to their country, not to mention the genetic modification and all those issues. That tells me, irrespective of good or bad, other countries are picking up and advancing in their technology. And now Western Hemisphere is in a doubt. Should we be dependent on the Eastern Hemisphere, or should we block them, or what to do? And I'm sure China is now working on 8G, and we are still figuring out whether we should allow 5G. That is a direct impact on the caps of immigration that American immigration policy had distracted instead of opening up, closed down, and now we found ourselves in a disadvantage in the global leadership. Not only in the global leadership deficit we have in every other place in the last 2 years, but overall last 20 years we lost the technological advance, whether we want to agree it or not. That would be your challenge once you become president. The national security, do we encourage these companies, the Chinese or Indian companies, to have their market share in America, or shall we keep blocking them in the name of national security? It always comes down to legal immigration, how we handled it, or lack thereof, how we mishandled it.
Yeah.
So how do we correct it? The Other major immigration flaw or gap that we have today is, yes, Trump administration has announced it's going to be merit-based only. Great, that has been the situation for a long time. But the entire world is not India and China. And every country has its own situation. And American global participation is different in the country they are participating, be it Middle East or South America. Like for example, I read an NPR article yesterday, 4 million Venezuelans have left Venezuela. We are worried about 1 million at the border. When you become president in 2 years, that will be your first challenge for immigration, how to handle 4 million at the border. Our participation is there for economic reasons or global leadership, but there is no backup plan. The moment the immigration has become a domestic conversation instead of foreign policy conversation, not only divided America straight halfway through, and politicians, presidential candidates taking advantage of that, which we saw in 2015, 2016, just to become president as a domestic policy. I think overall in immigration debate, legal or undocumented or whatever you want to call it, it goes back to lack of direction of how to handle immigration, not only just from Europe, now we have expanded throughout the globe. And are we going to see everyone equally, or are we going to have prejudices in the country that we are going to allow? Then I leave it up to you with these thoughts that this is very thorough plan. I really appreciate you actually digging through it. And we have Immigration Entrepreneur Summit Board of Directors, Swama is right here. He actually is the key of a lot of immigration entrepreneurs to put them in a positive way. Just in Iowa, there are about $2 billion worth of taxes that we contribute to the overall GDP of Iowa. And MJ Ghazali, my good friend, is one of the award recipient a couple of years ago. I would like to know your thoughts about most of the presidential candidates. What they do is define the problem really accurately, and then say, once you solve that, how great this country would be. We all agree on that. The gap is with the Congress we have, with the restrictions you have as a president, how are you going to get us here? And this definitely addresses a little bit of it, but I definitely would like to know your thoughts, given the Congress, judiciary, and executive branch with your limited power as a president. How are you going to get us to this dream place where everyone can be part of the American dream of buying houses as soon as you become president, and make sure your kids are eligible for a scholarship, you don't have to worry about college tuition, and travel back and forth between my hometown and here without worrying about where I'm going to get back. Please.
Thank you, Prakash. You said, and many of us have talked about how the legacy and the tradition of this country and what has distinguished us from most other places on the planet is that we have not defined ourselves by race or common ancestry. We're all created equal, and we welcome people, at least in our ideal and what we aspire to, from all over the world to reveal their genius here. So certainly that's part of our tradition. That's how I like to think about the United States of America. But there's also a nativist, intolerant, racist tradition in this country. The Chinese Exclusion Act, the No Irish Need Apply in the 19th century, Operation Wetback under the Nixon administration, President Trump saying that Muslims are so inherently defective or violent that they should be banned from entering the United States of America. And you have to think really hard to find another country that said that one people based on their religion should not be allowed to be in a country. The only one I can find is the Third Reich that would say that about one people of one religion, or describing Mexicans as rapists and criminals, though they commit violent crimes at a lower rate than those who were born here. And I think about that choice that we have before us. Which America will we be? It's never been more of an open question than it is now. In our hometown, at LBJ Elementary, third grade girl asking, why does the president not like me? She happens to be Mexican American. She's internalized this hatred and racism. We told that story in Houston, Texas, and a Muslim family said our third grade daughter asked us the same question. Though we were born in this country, she was born in this country, she thinks that she does not belong. And then what does that say to the rest of the world? Those whom you are describing, that we will need to be able to maintain our competitive edge, to grow this economy at the rate that we want to be able to be the leaders globally on the technologies that will allow us to successfully confront climate change before it is too late. It might be the United States, it might be China that comes up with this. I'd much rather it be the United States. And of course, our competitive advantage is that while China is going to primarily rely on those who were born in China, the United States is going to be able to rely on the people of the planet who want to call this country their home. That's our competitive advantage. It always has been. We lose it at our peril. So I'll just tell you that you ask a really difficult question. We diagnosed the problem. We prescribed the solution. How do we get there? It has to be with a president who, and I try to distinguish myself perhaps from some other Democrats, who will not be defensive about this, who will not say, first this, the walls, the internal enforcements, this or that other thing, the boxes that I have to check so that I've satisfied your concerns about my security bona fides. What if it were just, we're going to do the right thing in the best interests of this country, and that also happens to be the morally just and correct thing to do for this country. Nothing to apologize for, nothing to be defensive about. So I think leading in that way, and not waiting until January of 2021 to do it, but doing it now in June of 2019 is critically important to any prospect we have of being successful on this point. And so the intolerance, the racism, the Islamophobia that we see now must be met not with a tolerance, I think that's incredibly important, not with a respect, but a full embrace of our differences. That is the foundation of our success and our strength and our security. So I think reflecting that best of America tradition is critical to actually getting these things done for the best of our future going forward. Thank you, Prakash. Appreciate that.
We're drawing to a close here, I think. I had pitched a campaign on an hour of O'Rourke family tips on raising 3 children, which would be really helpful for me and my wife, but I don't think we're going to be able to do that, unfortunately, this morning. But really appreciate the conversation, really appreciate everybody up here and everybody who came out on a Saturday morning, and appreciate both of you for being here and bringing this conversation to Iowa, because immigration affects every community in America, right? And has some unique aspects in border communities, but has unique aspects in Des Moines, Iowa, right? And I appreciate your plan here, and thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Nathan, for organizing this, and to each of you for participating in this and joining us and sharing with us. I wrote down what you have advocated for, and we'll look at how we can include that in the plan. Continue to make this better, much as you have made me a better candidate by giving me the chance to listen to you and be with you here today. To everyone who came to join us and are watching from afar, we thank you as well. I think this is one of the greatest opportunities that we have as a country, and we'll make sure that we're leading on it now, and you're helping us to do that. So thank you. We're very grateful. Appreciate it. Thank you.